Hi everybody and welcome to Heel Heat. My name is George Coles, and on this episode we're doing It Came From the Network. And if you've been following along, we're following our theme for November. We're going back to the land of extreme, ECW November to Remember for 1997. Now if you haven't seen my shows before, I review everything with a 1 to 5 scale. 1 is the worst, 5 is the best. Let's jump right in. We get the first match of the show, Chris Candido versus Tommy Rogers. This is fantastic. They start off hot. These are two really good wrestlers. We get a really good match, and before it could go to conclusion, Lance Storm comes out. At the time, Lance Storm was a prospect for the Triple Threat, which Chris Candido was a part of, and they had recently lost Bam Bam Bigelow. We'll get into that more later. So Storm was trying to impress, brings out Jerry Lynn, who they say at the time was tag teaming with Tommy Rogers, but I don't remember that at all, which leads the referee, John Molyneux, to say, we're going to turn this into a tag team match. So it went from the first match right into Candido and Storm versus Rogers and Lynn, which continues to be fantastic. If these were two separate matches, they would both be fantastic and probably my two favorite, maybe two of the three favorite matches on the card. But I really enjoyed this. I really enjoyed both versions. The start with the singles match going into a tag team. It's kind of what made ECW special. You talk about the surprises and that anything can happen. Literally, a match could be announced and a different match could be made in the middle of it. And you didn't bat an eye. It didn't feel like it was wrong or forced or anything terrible about it. Ultimately, Candido and Storm pick up the win. You start to see, even this early on in it, where Candido really wants the glory to himself and doesn't care about Storm. I thought this was all fantastic. I'm giving this a 5. Going from that, we get a little bit of a hype video from Mikey Whipwreck and Just Incredible, showing Mikey Whipwreck beating Steve Austin, which of course they would, because at this time, Steve was well on his way to being the biggest star in the wrestling business. This was about 5 months out before he wins the title at WrestleMania 14. He was already well on his way. This is right after, or actually it's right before Survivor Series, but anyway, I digress. We get that goes right into the match. Mikey Whipwreck versus Just Incredible, a former ECW champion versus a future ECW champion. This is probably my least favorite match of the card. And it's not that I don't like Mikey or Justin. I think they're both great. It's just for whatever reason, this just didn't work for me. And it's not that it was a bad match, don't get me wrong by any means. I think they went back to a trope with Mikey Whipwreck that I wish they would have passed on. He had already got past that point, and maybe that's part of why I didn't like it as much, because they leaned back on the Mikey Whipwreck being a lucky underdog that can barely win, which Mikey does pick up the win here. And they kind of leaned back on that trope where he had already evolved past that. Even though that you could tell even at this point in time, this early into his run, they were grooming Just Incredible to be someone great in the company. Still felt like, I don't know. I wish they would have had a better match is what I'm basically saying. I know they could have had. And maybe that's why it's taken away from me. For all that reason, I'm giving this one a 3. It was good, but I expected better from these two. Next up, we get what I think might be the best promo of Al Snow's career. He's backstage sitting down, talking to the head, kind of manic, kind of disjointed, all over the place. You get Nova and the Blue Meanie are there looking like they're getting ready for stuff to do later on. This is just a fantastic promo, and showing that Al Snow, even as legendary as he is probably a little bit of an underused talent, because you could see here where the guy can absolutely had it. He was absolutely charismatic, and he was a fantastic wrestler. He really hit on something super interesting when he pulled out the head, and this was just amazing. A nice little promo. From that, we go into our next match, which is for the TV Championship, Taz versus Pitbull number 2. Pitbull number 2 was brought to the ring with Pitbull number 1, and Lance Wright, who had with him Brackus, but they didn't say Brackus' name. He was just a bodyguard on loan from Vince McMahon. This was during the time that Lance Wright was leading a faction of quote-unquote WWF wrestlers, where they were actually guys that WWF was loaning to ECW to basically help them in their careers kind of as a quasi-developmental. This was awesome. Taz pretty much dominated. I mean, early in the game, Pitbull had some offense, but Taz turned it around. This is the Taz we love. Taz chokes out Pitbull number 2 to get the win. Afterwards, he's trying to goad Brackus into a fight, but security comes out and a rather large security guy gets in Taz's face, which we know what's going to happen. Taz chokes him out. The great thing is that they cut away from this. Paul Heyman, Paulie Dangerously, was on commentary for this match, and he keeps yelling, cut, 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 show something else. Kind of making it seem like this wasn't supposed to happen. He shouldn't have attacked the security guard, which I always kind of like that little attention to detail that they tried to keep a little bit of kayfabe, even though the security guard is obviously an indie wrestler. I don't know who it was. He didn't look familiar watching it back. If you watch this, or you know already, leave down in the comments who that was, because it's got to be an indie guy, or a guy that just was in the wrestling school and never really made it. I believe this came from Pittsburgh area, so I would assume he was a Pittsburgh/Ohio guy. Anyway, another great match. I'm giving that a 5. I really enjoy, even though it was a shorter match, I loved what they did, and it's paralleling what they do now with Hook. Hook's run so far in his matches are very much in the vein of what his father was doing here, and you see just how great it's getting over. When they cut away, they show the video of Bam Bam Bigelow throwing Spike Dudley into the crowd, which at that time only happened a couple weeks before. Again, just another historic piece of ECW. Everybody knows that video. Everybody that watches wrestling, everybody that knows about ECW knows that video. So just another great piece that they could show here, along with the Mikey Whipwright pinning Steve Austin. From that, we go into our 4-way tag team championship match. The Dudley Boys are defending against the FBI. This grouping is Tracy Smothers and Little Guido, Balls Mahoney and Axel Rotten, and the Gangstonators, Kronos and New Jack. I love New Jack, but I would be okay on never seeing any of his matches on the network again. Not because I dislike his matches, because the song that they choose to use to dub over Natural Born Killers is so bad, and they just play it all the way through. I would have rather had them just give me silence here. I'd rather have silence than that song. That song is terrible. And I know this is an earlier edit. This was when it was edited before they were able to use WWF, so you had a lot of the times they would say WWF, they would say WW, and even later on they blur out the WWF logo at a part. I just hate that they do that to New Jack's matches. It makes them unwatchable in my opinion, because that song is so bad. And if you watch them, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You don't have to be a fan of rap music to understand the difference in Natural Born Killers, one of the great songs of the 90s in rap, and this garbage that, I don't know. I could make a better rap song, and I'm a terrible rapper. If I was any good at it, I'd probably make videos rapping. But anyway, I digress. We get the match, and in classic ECW form, it's elimination style. The Gangstonators get eliminated first, followed by the Dudley Boys, which seems to have us leading to the fact that Balls and Axel, who were out of the teams, they were the only one that didn't win the tag championship ever, but they were, spoiler alert, they were heavily being hyped as being the next tag team champions or being the next contenders. That doesn't happen. They get costed the match by Judge Jeff Jones, who comes down. He's just Jeff Jones, who's a referee, who's an evil referee, to help the FBI pick up the win. So Tracy Smothers and Little Guido win the match and become the new tag team champions. I wanted to like this match. Again, the music took me out of it a lot. The match itself was kind of all over the place and kind of a mess in a couple ways. It wasn't bad. Don't get me wrong. It's not a bad match. It's just there was a couple factors that made me not like it as much as I wanted to. I'm giving this one a 3. I thought it was good. It should have been great. Maybe if they kept the original song, it would have been better for me. It would have made the experience watching it better. I digress. Coming from that, we get a flag match with Rob Van Dam versus Tommy Dreamer. Story with this is Rob Van Dam was leading a WWE invasion or WWF invasion at the time. Him, Sabu, Jerry Lawler, even Jim Cornette got involved. This was a really good match. These two getting together anytime they got together, whether it was singles or tag, they always put together great matches. They worked so well with each other, and they just kept, it was great. There are some things that I'm going to complain about here in a minute. The goal was to put the flag over your opponent. Ultimately, at the end, we get the referee bumps. Judge Jeff Jones comes out again, or Judge Jeff Jones at the time. Furnace and LaFon, Doug Furnace and Phil LaFon, who were again on loan from WWF at the time, came out. Stevie Richards makes a surprise appearance. He had been in WCW for a short period of time. He left when Raven left. He came back here. I mean, he kind of fizzled out in WCW really quickly. And basically, it all breaks down. They're all involved. Sabu comes out. Sabu eventually attacks Beulah, which leads Tommy Dreamer to laying on top of Beulah so she doesn't get injured. They did have the flag, the WWF flag, over Tommy at one point. No real winners ever announced, because it leads us right into Sabu versus Sandman, the next match. But anyway, before I go on to that match, I'm going to give this one a 4. I liked everything about it except the ending. For as big as a show as November to Remember is, I always thought November to Remember was the equivalent of WrestleMania for ECW. And even if not that, maybe SummerSlam, at the very least. Because it always felt like that was their biggest card of the year. Anyway, I'm going to give this one a 4. I wish there would have been a finish. This is one of the times, like I mentioned earlier, the non-finish made it better. The non-finish made it worse because it didn't pay off the end of the feud. It probably would have got a 5 if they had a finish. Anyway, I digress. We're going back into our next match, the aforementioned Sabu versus Sandman. This is a ladder match. It's kind of funny because in the beginning of the match, Joey Styles says that we're going to have ladders and tables, and there'll probably be chairs too. And this predates the table, ladders, and chairs match, so kind of interesting that they already were talking something similar to that there. This was a fun brawl. I mean, these guys are fantastic. Sabu is a great wrestler, fantastic, highly underrated. One of the most influential wrestlers of the time frame. One of the guys that doesn't get enough credit. I will say this to the end of my life. Sabu is an absolute innovator and probably should be looked at as one of the greats of all time. Sandman is a lot better than most people give him credit to. And when he was in there with a guy that could really highlight his positives, like Raven, on the last video we talked about it with Raven. Here with Sabu, he highlighted his positives here. They brawled a lot. There was a lot of violence involved. This was a really fun match. Sabu did pick up the win. I'm giving that one a 4. I thought it was really good. Now, coming from that, we get a little promo with Taz, who's calling out Bam Bam Bigelow, because he knows that Bam Bam Bigelow is going to win the main event, and he wants to wrestle him for the championship, which leads us right into our main event of the show. For the ECW World Heavyweight Championship, Bam Bam Bigelow defending against Shane Douglas. Part of the story of this is Bam Bam had previously been with Shane in the Triple Threat, and Shane was trying to gain back this. The rest of the Triple Threat, Candido and Storm, are barred from ringside. This was another really fun match. This was different than I remembered. I didn't remember the match going the way it did, to be perfectly honest with you. I forgot just how dominant they made Bam Bam look in this match. It made it look like it was almost impossible for Shane to win. And it was a great story that they told here. Eventually, it does come to the end where Shane does pick up the win with a belly-to-belly suplex, but he really had to work with it. It was really in question. And the main person that really sold this story, in my opinion, and sold this match more than anything else, even the great wrestling that was going on in the ring, was Francine. Her concern, her honest reactions, like, it felt real. It felt like she really felt her friend and her partner, whatever you want to call them at the time, it felt like he was going to lose, and she was seriously concerned about not only him losing, but his well-being, that he not be hurt. It was a very interesting thing. She added so much to this, and again, I've said this like 7 times in this video already. Another person that doesn't quite get the credit that they deserve on how fantastic they really were. I love this. I love Francine, and she adds so much to a presentation. And it's not just because she's beautiful, because she's absolutely beautiful. Don't get me wrong on that. she brought so much emotion to the table. You can even see it if you go back and watch Beyond the Mat, where she's crying and Paul Heyman's consoling her. She just feels so real. She feels like we would feel. If I was in there and my favorite wrestler was losing and it was real, these are my reactions. This is how I would react. It's just a fantastic piece of work. Again, like I said, Shane picks up the win here. I'm giving this one a 5. I thought it was fantastic. Overall, a really good card. The 2 matches I would probably say I could live without are still good. The 4-way tag match, which, again, because the music probably gave me a worse opinion of it than what it was. And Whipwreck vs. Credible, which might be on me. I might have expected more than I should have out of that match. But overall, I'm going to give this card, I'm probably going to give it a 4. If I did half measures, I'd probably do a 4.5. It's probably right in the middle of a 4 and a 5. But I'm going to give it a 4. I thought it was really good. It was a really fun show to watch. Again, I don't know that I think it's as good as the last two, 95 and 96, but it's still better than 99.9% of the wrestling shows I've ever watched. And that's saying a lot, because I probably watched 20,000 different wrestling shows over my lifetime. If you figure an average of 5 wrestling shows a week for 30 or almost 40 years now. Wow, I'm really old. I started watching wrestling when I was about 6 or 7. It was right before Hulk Hogan became world champion that I started watching. So right about 6, about to turn to 7. So anyway, so let's say 5 shows a week, that's 250 a year, roughly, times 30 years. I mean, do the math, that's what, 60,000? I don't know. I'm not doing the math quickly in my head, but you can figure it out. Anyway, like I said, this is one of the top tier shows ever still. It's still in the top 1%. It's very enjoyable. I would highly recommend watching it if you haven't. And that's the thing with my videos. Before you watch these reviews, and I'm saying this, if you see I put a new video out with a show that I'm going to review, I recommend watching that so you can see what your views are compared to mine. And then if we have different views, let's say Whipwreck vs. Credible was your favorite match of the show. Let me know in the comments. Tell me, hey, I think you're totally wrong. I really love this because of this. Just amazing. Hopefully we can, get that out there. My whole thing is to promote wrestling on this channel and what I really enjoy. So hopefully I'm helping to do that, and hopefully getting some eyes sometimes on great stuff like this, sometimes not so much. Sometimes the shows I watch aren't great, but they're still worth watching because you get a little bit of everything. I'm getting way off on a tangent here, so I'm going to put that in closing. Like I said, I'm giving it overall a 4. If you made it all the way to the end, let's smash that like button. Share the video, subscribe if you haven't. If you made it to the end, let's put triple threat in the comments so I know you made it here. With that being said, my name is George Coles, and this has been another It Came From the Network.